Hi, and welcome to Skeptarchy, the podcast that covers everything you can think of through an anarchist or and skeptical lens. I'm Cory.
I'm Felicia.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Dell.
All right. So there, I did the intro. That covers the fact that I don't have a topic this evening.
It's your penance.
All right. Well, I know Dell has something she wants to talk to us about, so...
I do. Yeah. So, this goes to, I think we're going to talk about the Texas abortion thing later, but this is something that's really been bothering me is whenever anti-abortion stuff comes up, there's always this like cultural response from leftish people of, oh, are you going to adopt all the babies then? And like, you don't care about the babies after they're born. And what's really terrifying to me is that's because people don't realize, yes, they really do want to adopt the babies. Like that is phase 2 of their plan. There are over 1 million families waiting for babies to adopt and about 15,000 adoptable newborns every year. Adoptions cost tens of thousands of dollars just in fees to the mostly private Christian groups that facilitate the adoptions. It's big business. I was looking for numbers of like how much money these adoption places make like in aggregate, and I couldn't find any numbers on that. I think they're probably pretty well buried, but it's really common to have non-refundable fees to even sign up, to not even get placed with a baby, but to just sign up of $25,000 to $50,000. So that's just to like get on their listing to be shown to pregnant people who are considering giving their baby up for adoption. And then they pair them up in this very predatory way. So they try to get pregnant people enrolled in the program as early as possible. And then they get the families or the adoption agency paying things for the pregnant people. So they get them paying their medical expenses, paying even room and board, giving them a place to stay, especially if the people they're targeting are maybe housing insecure, maybe they have health problems, maybe they have addiction issues they need support with, right? They will spend maybe $10,000, $20,000 on these pregnant people during their pregnancy. And then, as almost always happens, people who are pregnant, the closer and closer things get, start to have questions about, is this a good idea? How is this really going to work? Do I actually want to give up my baby or not? The further along the pregnancy gets, it's very normal and very common for people to start to feel a lot more bonded to what they now feel is a living thing, that they have a relationship with. Whereas like maybe when they were 8, 12 weeks along, they didn't feel that way. And then it's really, 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 really common that once they've given birth, they are not ready to actually sign those papers. But they're usually on medications and they are usually forced to sign the papers. They usually have people from the adoption agency standing there in the room with them when they give birth. They have the adoptive parents whose hopes they've gotten up for the last 6 months or whatever. And it's a giant guilt trip fueled by the exhaustion and the drugs of having just given birth, because that's obviously exhausting and super emotional. And they almost never are allowed to back out. Even though if you survey a biological parents after the fact, like a year or two later, almost all of them will say they wish they didn't do it. It's really, really scary. And the entire concept of adoption generally relies on guilt-tripping pregnant people saying, these people are richer than you. They can provide a better life for your child.
Yeah.
So if you really loved your child, you would give them to this rich white WASP family.
It's always white. It's almost exclusively white people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get in, like, that's another level of the abortion, the adoption issue.
Yeah.
Is the whiteness of adoption, the Christianity of adoption. Like,
Yeah, it's Christian charities that do most of this. And now think about this in the context. We've seen a lot of laws, if we've been paying attention to the news recently, fights about adoption agencies who are working with state governments and whether or not they're allowed to discriminate in the families they place with. Now think about how critical those laws are in the context of this is phase 2 of their plan. Force people to have babies so that these quiverful type people can adopt as many of them as they want into their nice white Christian families.
It absolutely is about turning people with uteruses into broodmares. It is absolutely about using our bodies as the labor of birthing, not like being in labor, but like that it like to reduce our purpose to birthing,
right?
For that, like, it's very much. And then, we need to think about how this plays into white Christian nationalism and what was done to Indigenous people here in the United States and in Canada.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
Because this has been a systemic use of genocide, of stealing babies.
Exactly. So it's like a historical thing. It happened. It's happened in the UK. It happened in Australia in an almost more systematic and more recent way in Australia to Aboriginal families, even then to Indigenous families in North America. And yes, we have laws like ICWA. I don't exactly remember what that stands for, but it's the law that was made in response to the cultural genocide of forcibly adopting Native children. And the idea of that law is you have to try to place Native children with Native families first. And only after you've met a bunch of hurdles about not being able to find a Native family, can you adopt to a non-Native family. But it's still the same system, right? It's still the same judges. It's still the same court system. Yes, there's like one law in between, but these systems, I don't think people realize, like, there's still this cultural idea that there's tons of children out there just waiting for homes. Like,
right.
Orphans are just out there waiting for homes. And that's just not the case. The children that are out there waiting for homes are children that are like 13 years old or older, and they were taken from homes by CPS. And I just want us to stop and think a little bit about what causes children's homes to be unsafe most of the time. It's poverty and or mental health issues or substance abuse issues, all of which we could solve as a society by actually providing a humane system for people to be in. But instead, we traumatize both them and their children by pulling them apart instead of actually providing what people need to get better and to be able to parent properly. The statistics on health outcomes for adopted children, even children that like didn't undergo any other trauma, because the research is starting to show that being adopted, no matter like if it was the day you were born or any other time, is itself a trauma. No matter how you do it, it's a trauma. Because the outcomes for children that were adopted are significantly worse when it comes to depression, suicidal ideation, stress-related health outcomes, just all of it. It's just not a good solution. It's a horrible, in the best case scenario, because obviously like even bad systems sometimes have good outcomes, right? Like I have adopted people in my life that are like, I love my life. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy with the way it went down. I don't have any bad feelings about it. Like good outcomes can happen from fundamentally fucked up systems, but like the system itself is at best, if like everyone involved was legitimately not ableist, not racist, not perpetuating these terrible systems, but they were just in it for the kids, it would still just be like a Band-Aid for a really screwed up system, because if parents are actually given like stable housing and mental health support and physical health support and just all of the things that America does not let people have ever at all, Like, that's what would actually fix this without ripping families apart. But we've decided that ripping families apart is a better idea. And that's because we've decided that people who don't live up to the WASP stereotype are inferior. Like, that they're not good enough to have their own children, and that they're, you know, in some way flawed in such a way that, like, they don't even deserve to have their own, like, reproductive, it's an extension of reproductive autonomy, right? Because it's at a certain point the kid is born, so it's not really reproductive anymore, but it's the same situation, right? To have autonomy over what happens to their own families. So, like, I don't know, like, I just see it so much even on the left of, like, people just, like, thinking adoption is this, like, touchy-feely, warm, fuzzy, charitable action. And, like, if you look into, like, why children are taken from families, there is so much racism. There is so much ableism. It's just awful. And how traumatic it is. And I think maybe in another episode, I'll just specifically talk about the issues of transracial adoption, because what transracially adopted kids go through is
right.
So awful.
It's terrifying. Yeah, it is. It's really, we'll have to dive into that one a little bit more, because in the rare situations where people of color are able to do adoptions, it is very different outcomes. But when it's white people adopting kids of color, it almost does end up, I mean, not almost, most of the time what ends up happening is the children of color are essentially raised to be cheap labor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're given less resources in school. They are given less opportunity. They're held to much higher standards. The pressures are so hard that what we end up seeing is, like, replicating cheap labor. It's so scary. And it also isolates children of color from communities of solidarity, right?
I think I was listening to something like Vice News report a couple months ago, and they had an interview with a young Indigenous woman who was put into a foster care home as a young person because her mother had addiction issues. And as she was getting older, the family that she was with, they were asking her, hey, can we adopt you? And she was going to do that. But then I guess something about the way the system said, like, if an Indigenous person is adopted by white people or something outside of her tribe, then she has to, like, give up her status as a Native person. And it was like, now she's left with this option to, you know, she could stay with these people she's kind of happy with, or she could lose her entire history, you know, her connection to her history. It was,
that's some kill the Indian, save the man type shit right there.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and I want to talk about, kind of jumping off what Dell said about people on the left are always saying, like, oh, what are you going to adopt all these kids? That seems to fall into a narrative that abortion is fundamentally bad, like something to be avoided, that birthing is definitely preferable to abortion, and that abortion is just a necessary evil. And I think that's a real problem in how we talk about abortion. Yeah. I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people on the left. I've heard it recently. I got accused of bullying for saying, well, in my opinion, for a woman who's like, I never want anyone to need an abortion. And it's like, we don't talk that way about other medicine, do we? Like, right. We don't talk about needing cancer surgery. Nobody ever says, well, I don't want anyone to ever need cancer surgery. It's like, but, like, people are going to need it. Sure, of course, we should take efforts to make sure, you know, our environments are safer and educate people on ways to avoid cancer. But people are going to need surgery for cancer. We don't say, I don't ever want somebody to need it. It keeps this thing in our minds where abortion is fundamentally sad or bad. And like I said earlier, a necessary evil. And I think when we say things like, what are you going to adopt all these kids? That if the answer was yes, If they said absolutely, of course, then the left loses that argument, and then people might even buy into it, right? Like, well, you see, we do have adoption, so maybe these abortion laws aren't so bad, right? Yeah. Like, I think that's a real problem in the way that we discuss it, because abortion is just medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think of it as fundamentally sad. I don't think that there's a moral equivalency that we can draw between an embryo and a baby. I understand that these are spectrums, that we don't have an on-off moment for not a person to person. But I think that, I mean, most abortions happen well before any sort of gray area. And the ones that happen as we start to get into that gray area are dire circumstances. Like third trimester abortions that's a very different circumstance in which laws are kind of incapable of addressing that nuance. But the vast majority of abortions happen much earlier, well before there's any question on the personhood. And I just don't see, like, I think we're giving too much ground to this argument of to saying that, like, it's fine to force people to birth if they're going to this option.
Not to get too partisan about it, but that's the liberal way, right? They give up ground in order for some kind of compromise. That's why.
So the way, the issue I have with the whole, we don't want anyone to need to get an abortion is it's setting up this false dichotomy, which is based around personal responsibility. You know, with some exceptions, cancer and other diseases like that are not generally things that we can avoid getting, as it were, right? There are so many different factors that are outside our control over whether or not we get cancer, whereas they view the abortion debate as, well, if you just didn't have sex. Again, it's about controlling women's bodies, right? And it's saying that that abortion is go ahead. You're right.
Right.
You're right. I appreciate that distinction, and you are right. I should have said that differently. But yeah, it's about controlling the bodies of people with uteruses and saying that if they didn't have sex, then they wouldn't have gotten pregnant, and so they wouldn't need the abortion. It's all about putting the fault back on them. And, like, that is, again, it's a bullshit way of trying to invoke the whole personal responsibility aspect that is so prevalent in liberal ideology. And then as far as the, like when liberals say, well, will you just adopt them all? And if they say yes, that still creates the problem of you're forcing this person to go through 9 months of pregnancy and all of the potential health complications and the trauma and pain that comes with that. It's not just about, you know, where will the baby go? No one is thinking of the pregnant person, what's going to happen to them. You are still essentially forcing your own ideology on someone else's body, and that is why, like, throughout the entirety of, like, my understanding of the abortion debate, it's always come down to, we shouldn't, like, why are we trying to force our views on the bodies of other people? That is not a thing that we should be doing.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
I feel like I have an answer.
Okay.
So the conservative, I'm working on this essay hypothesis. I think I've figured out the conservative worldview.
Okay.
Because so much of it seems so contradictory, but it's not as we dig in. But fundamentally, they believe that there is a purpose to life. It can be a divine purpose. Sometimes it's secularized, but honestly, it's the same kind of thing.
Well, they just Jordan Peterson it, which is like, yeah, technically secular, but it's like
it's secularized, but it's still just the same. It's a divine purpose for life. That your body doesn't actually belong to you. Your body belongs to the purpose for your existence. You have a duty to fulfill that purpose. And when you deviate from that purpose, you deserve to be punished. And if you have sex outside of marriage, you have deviated from your purpose because you are supposed to get married and you are supposed to raise people into their purpose in order to continue this so everyone goes to heaven. And if you don't do this, you're going to hell. And you might bring others to hell with you. Or society will collapse or some other, catastrophic ending. Right. It can all be essentialized back to this divine purpose. And that's why when they
really believe society is going to collapse, which I just find so ridiculous. Like, society will absolutely collapse if we don't do things exactly the way I think my grandpa did it.
Like every time.
Which isn't even
every
true.
Time it is a societal ending threat.
I find
and then
interesting.
they'll use like bullshit evolutionary, like behavioral evolution or whatever, like to justify this shit. And it doesn't make any fucking sense because evolution doesn't really give a shit as long as most everyone just keeps going. Like, evolution doesn't give a shit.
I
don't
find
care
it
if you're
interesting.
Yeah, I heard somebody tell me, like, well, since you believe in evolution, shouldn't you hate gay people? And I was like, explain this to me. And they're like, well, if everyone's gay, there won't be babies. I'm like, well, not everyone is gay, and bisexual and pansexual people exist. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
I find it interesting they're so afraid of
the existence of gay. Like the existence of people being gay is a threat. It is a threat to existence. It will send us to hell, either metaphorically or literally. So this whole thing, like, that's why they will say, like, it is absolutely not sexist to say that women, because if you have a uterus, you're a woman.
Bioessentialist.
If an intersex person has a uterus, they're a woman. End of story. And there's no such thing as gender spectrums. Like, so they'll say that of course women should birth. That's their purpose. So yes, it's very sad if a woman dies in childbirth or gets very sick. Of course, it's such a tragedy, but she did die fulfilling her purpose. And that's okay ultimately, right? Like, if the goal is to get us to heaven, her purpose was to birth. Mm-hmm. And with men, again, there's no such thing as a spectrum here. There is on and off. There is right and wrong. There are simple answers. Everything falls within this. For men, of course, it's not sexist to say that women have to birth. Men have to do everything else. Men do have to work until they die. God damn it. And women have to do everything they can to raise children until they die. Until they fucking die. That's, of course, so that's why they'll say, like, of course it's not sexist. Nobody's body belongs to them. Nobody's does. You have a purpose that you need to serve.
And I always find it so, like, well, it's kind of makes me feel hopeless at a certain point, but, like, this, like, authoritarian, like, mindset they have about, like, their relationship with God is, like, exactly what an abusive, controlling spouse would do to their family, right? Like, and it's just like, you realize that and you're like, don't you understand how fucked up this sounds? That, like, your body doesn't belong to you and you exist for this purpose, that this, being dictated that you don't even like, but it's like, oh, but they literally think that's God. So, like, I'm never going to change their mind to think that, like, this situation is abusive.
No, it doesn't matter if it's abusive or not. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. This is the purpose. It is divine. How dare you? And so, like, that's ultimately, like, I got into this with a guy today. And by the way, he didn't disagree with me when I laid that out for him. But he was like, well, you just want to fuck without consequences. And I'm like, yeah, yes.
That's not what?
And, like, that was supposed to be his, like, that's just what you want. And I'm like, yes, fucking is great. I don't know what the problem is.
That's like telling somebody, like, you like the taste of that food, don't you? Like, yeah, I do. And
You just want to enjoy your life.
Delicious food.
How dare you?
Yes, I do. And you don't want to get fat from it. Actually, I mean, sure, maybe you do. Who cares? But like that would be like that's the same idea, right? Like fat shaming. You just want to eat and have no consequences, which also comes into plastic surgery shaming. Like, yeah, sure. Actually, I actually think that would be fine if we could have delicious food, which actually kind of comes back to a systemic answer. Obesity and being overweight isn't individual personal failings. We know this from the studies and the science. This isn't people being gluttonous or selfish or lazy. It's complicated factors outside of their control. Yeah. And people do like eating delicious food. And we actually do not have to choose between eating delicious food and health. In America, though, it is profitable to make our food bad and to make us unable to have delicious food in abundance for everyone, which is also why obesity is a problem in America for lower income people. Like the food gets worse and worse quality, and then you are not able to maintain a body that you're supposed to because you have to eat. You have to eat. You don't get a choice.
And then it's profitable to make sure we all feel really bad about it so that we'll spend more money on their fancy protein shake they're going to sell us or, whatever their new concept is in whatever their new buzzword is that they think is going to get people to do it or,
it's keto
weight loss
now.
Supplement.
It's the carnivore diet. Like, and it all, it's just this cycle and it keeps repeating. And like, I know personally, I struggle with my physical body in a lot of ways. And at a certain point, there's not much you can do about that struggle because it's so ingrained in your mind. Like,
well, because society is constantly reinforcing it. So like, it's really hard to break out of it when it's just like all around you all the time. I was just having that conversation. So I think probably if you're very online, you've seen the meme going around with the new Thor from God of War. And then comparing him to the strongest men in the world. Well, I was going to say, so then comparing him to so then people being mad that he's not cut enough and then just showing the last 4 strongest men in the world, right? I was just telling my husband, I'm so horrified that this horrible, unrealistic body image, we can see how bad it's gotten from even the 90s to today, or especially if you look at movies in the 80s, right, compared to today, and the body standard is off the charts ridiculous that they're showing these men looking like.
It is an impossible body now. We talk about
ridiculous.
In the early 2000s, in the 90s and the early 2000s, skinny, very unhealthy skinny was in, but now the body standard is one that cannot be achieved without plastic surgery. You need to have a big ass and thick thighs, but no belly and small arms. Oh, and huge breasts.
Of course.
And I think it's so funny because I can look at what men are being held up to and I can be like, that's ridiculous. It is tragic. It is whatever. But I cannot internalize that when I am comparing myself to women. I can't do it. I cannot internalize it to the same level that it is so plastic, it's so fake, it's photoshopped, it's whatever. I can't do it.
I can't internalize it for myself, but the bodies, the men, women, and non-binary people I am attracted to is a very wide spectrum. It's with a lot of different variation and a lot of different fat or not fat or cut or not cut. I have a very broad spectrum that I find myself attracted to, and I can internalize that as great for me, for me to be attracted to and valid. Right. But when it comes to looking at my own damn body, no, I must meet the standard. Mm-hmm. It's awful. It is such a toxic, constant thing in our brains. And I mean, I'm polyamorous, I'm bisexual, I'm a sex worker. I have all these I live this non-traditional life, and yet I still fall into these societal standards for myself. I get worried that I'm somehow being disloyal with my polyamorous partner if I start seeing someone new. Like, it's just this very bizarre internalized issues that, like, and maybe it's just from living as a woman and society treating me as a woman. The standards for, like, the internalized standards for women are just so different. And if you're perceived as a woman, you get those standards. Like, it's just, and I am a woman. Like, I am cis. But, like, I just think it's really hard. Like, I don't really know what to do, because I end up replicating a lot of the standards myself. I'm wearing makeup. And I'm not gonna get on a show without it. So it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, I can't speak so much to the experience of women, obviously, but for myself, from the, like, that male bodybuilder type body, I'm a dude in my 40s, and I constantly am still struggling with the fact that I have a little bit of a belly. That's
awful, isn't it?
Yeah,
no, we lost Dell.
Her computer might have calved out.
It looked like she was in a clawfist. Is that what they're calling them now?
Yes.
We live in a boring dystopia, y'all.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not saying work from home is bad. I'm just saying, like, that sounds like some boring dystopia shit, that, like, people have to make an office in their home.
Yes.
And they
instead
have
of just
to use
being
up
able
their
to be at home,
space, like, like a closet, and they have to shove themselves into a tinier box. Not that offices are not panopticons, because they are.
True. Yeah, especially most offices I've been in, like, they intentionally seat people so that anyone can just come by and see what's on your screen at any time.
Yeah. Yep. Panopticon for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They just do that so that you're not watching porn at work, right?
Yeah.
Another great thing about my job. Somebody said to me, I was on Utah Outcast last night, and we have a live stream, and one of our patrons told me, you just need to think of it, like, from the male perspective, like, about women. And I was like, oh, honey, that's what I do all day, every day.
Yeah. I don't think there is a sex worker alive who hasn't been forced to think about everything they do from the male perspective.
It's a weird thing, because
yeah,
I prefer to pay for my porn. I prefer to follow people who, like, I can kind of project myself onto. But I have not really ever had the kind of disposable income to throw that around. And for a lot of non-men, they don't spend money on porn. So a lot of sex workers don't market to them. Mm-hmm. And I just have to wonder if it's like a feedback loop that, like, like, people don't, like, people who aren't men don't generally have a lot of the money to spend on porn.
I was about to say, like, how much of that is just that, like, because of our power structures, non-men have significantly less disposable income. And what we do have, we end up getting forced to use on makeup and different clothes and so much other crap, right?
Yeah. I was thinking it was primarily a disparity in marketing, like, things like sexual content, and, there's also, a whole host of other things that are deemed as being male-centered.
But we know non-men watch porn.
Oh, yeah.
Almost at the same rates. Like,
is it that close?
Watch porn. So,
yeah.
Like, it's so strange that all the marketing, but I'm not going to lie, like, I have tried to market to non-men more, and the money's just not there. And since it's a form of work, I do have to do things that result in income, and men are the ones who have the income to spend on this. And not just have the income, like you said, Dell, like, but also that they have a lot more income for their wants rather than living up to expectations.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's
that's something I hadn't considered, is that when we get disposable income, we're supposed to spend it on other things like makeup. And then we do, because if you don't spend it on that, you actually get treated worse. But then you also...
I was about to say, you also feel like you have this return on investment, right? Like you're like, I'm going to have, if I move up an income bracket, like I basically moved up an income bracket in February because I was like in a horrible financial situation and I got out of it. And so now it's like, I find myself being like, I've moved up an income bracket. I'm considering like a whole different set of things to spend my money on. And now I'm thinking about things like, oh, the return on investment for getting eyelash extensions every month, is that worth it or is it not worth it, right? Like, because it's like, it matters for how you're perceived at work. It matters that you have to do less makeup at home. It matters that the mascara bothers my contacts, but I really can't go without any makeup at work because some people can pull it off, but like I have really bad acne, so I really don't feel like I can pull it off as a 30-something in a professional workplace. And it's just like, so like, getting your hair done more often so it looks more professional. If you're like in some sort of corporate world, as soon as you move up an income bracket, that's the first thing that you're thinking about spending your money on. And not because you're shallow, because you're thinking about like, what is the best use of my funds to keep me stable, you know, and to keep me getting the things that I want in life, like promotions.
Yep. Yeah. We just moved up an income level, like, and we're still getting caught up on some bills from a weird in-between place. But once that's caught up, we're talking about investing in plastic surgery for me so that I better fit the ideal, which then will return more paid people for my work, right? Like it's a literal investment, but also yeah, out in society, I will be perceived better. I will be treated better. And it's awful and it's hard. Like, it's really hard to sort it out.
My biggest problem is like people try to tell me that it's not true. And I'm like, no, that's complete bullshit. Like, nobody cares what you look like.
Oh, they very much do.
I was not born yesterday.
Gendered racism isn't real, right? That's what that is. Yes. Oh, and then, yeah. So we are people are obsessed with femme people's bodies, obsessed with their presentation, and they will never let you fucking forget it. But if they know that you work at it in any way, they will also use that to shame you. They will also, so again, like you better, like it is a constant fixation on our appearance. Like, like, oh, so you work so hard on makeup. You're so vain. Like it's a way to constantly keep you balanced. And thus your makeup must become more excellent because you definitely can't go without it. And you definitely need it to look like you're very easily wearing this makeup. Like it's just an enhancement. It's not, but like, no, it's very drastically changing your appearance, which is, well, and then there's also like a reward in being really good at makeup. Like it's an art form. And like, if you get good at like, Dell, your eyebrows are phenomenal. Like
return on investment. I got them microbladed because I did that in May. That was one of my things that I did when I moved up an income bracket.
That's one of the things I want to do, especially because then I don't have to worry about my eyebrows so much.
Exactly. I was like, the level that, so I have a really funny story, and I'm really like bad. I have bad like coordination and like bad at art, so like I couldn't ever do anything with them, but I always like tried or like wanted to do something with them, and there's like a cowlick in one that isn't in the other, and it just like constantly stressed me out. So I was just like, this is a way for $600 to just like take a big chunk of stress off of me, right? But so I was mentioning it to my husband because I'm like, $600 is not a small amount of money. And he was like, fine with it, but just like a little disconcerted by the whole thing. And then a week before I went in, I found out he thought that it was actually permanently shaving off my eyebrow hair and replacing it with tattoos.
Oh.
Because he didn't understand what microblading was. And I was just like, oh, honey.
I know. Permanent. Oh. It's so much energy goes into this. It's wild. And again, like I take pride in, I've always been an artistic person. I take pride in working, in making my face look pretty. Like.
Yeah. And I'm mostly looking for cheats because I'm not good at it at all, but I like know how important it is for me. And then I stress myself out about it. So I'm like, that's why I'm looking for to level up.
Oh, man, it's a whole thing. It's a whole ass thing. And I'm not about to stop because it works. It's necessary. So, it's like, it's a material reality. It's a material reality. And you do not get to stop. Even when you get older, even when you start to wrinkle, it does not matter. You have to be presenting as aesthetically pleasing as possible to get any sort of respect. It sucks. Mm-hmm. But it also, it's just a thing. And I'm wearing makeup.
I'm still thinking about Cory when you said it's like the colorblind, like saying the just be colorblind except for of sexism, right? Because like that's so exactly what it is. And it's so unhelpful. It's like a toxic positivity kind of thing almost, when people just like are constantly like, you need to just stop worrying about it and be like comfortable with yourself and how that'll fix
right,
it. And it's like,
that works.
It's actually really harmful to give people that kind of advice in a world that exists the way it actually does, because like it's really not helpful if you tell someone it won't affect you in any way, because it does, right? So like just like letting people believe that it's no big deal. Instead, we need to like frame it in realities of like trade-offs. And I kind of went through this with this. I was part of this conference for the last 4 days for LGBT college students. And I was part of some small mentoring groups. And I often in LGBT spaces fight a little bit of the, you definitely need to be authentic and come out and just be proud to be who you are and it'll be great. And I really push back on that because like it is not safe for everyone to be out and proud all the time. And if people are making the decision not to be out and proud, and that goes for disabilities too, like it goes for a lot of different things. And that's why racism is so hard, is because you can't, you don't get to come out as Black. Like you don't get to come out as your race, like most of the time. So it makes it hard. But like people, when they're deciding to be selectively out about anything, they are making the rational decision for them. And you need to like trust them that they made the right decision for themselves and not try to like talk them into doing something that feels unsafe for them. You can tell them, I will support you if you want to come out at work, or I will support you if you want to come out in this space, or like, what can I do to help you feel safe enough? But like, that is not the same thing as just like, so I was like dealing with that a little bit in some of the materials that we were given. There was a little bit of like, hold yourself accountable that you will always be your authentic self. And I was like, and one of the people in my group,
even if it gets you fired or whatever.
Yeah. And like, we're talking with college students that are like about to graduate with a lot of them are, it was specifically for a program that has a lot of 5-year students. Like it's very common for these type of degrees to take 5 years and like, and to demand internships and stuff. And these people really are like need a job when they graduate. And like, when I basically like pushed back on it, and I was like, yeah, this does not resonate with me. Like it is about trade-offs. Like I understand that there's certain things that I'm not willing to, especially with being autistic, like there's certain things that like it would take way too much energy for me to mask at work. And I understand that I'm not going to mask those things at work. And that's going to mean I'm not going to be promoted to manager. And I'm like, I have to be okay with that. Right. And it's about trade-offs. And in particular, the one person in my small group that was a person of color was like, thank you. The idea of like realistic trade-offs makes so much more sense to me than what people are saying about just like be yourself all the time. Cause like these kids are not necessarily going to be able to immediately pick a job that's just like, yeah, we love all queer people, no problem. Like, that is not the reality of capitalism for new graduates. Like,
well, and people will say, like, this is a thing, like, people say this all the time, like, you go, but people can get fired, and it's usually a very liberal and even like conservative liberal response. That's illegal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's illegal. It's happening. Like, I've gotten that so many times when, like, you point out that, like, housing discrimination for people of color is still very much happening. That redlining, although not a legal system anymore, is still in practice in many ways. And they'll go, but that's illegal. It does not matter. And, like, and so, like, I don't think people really understand that about LGBTQ students. Like, you can get hurt. You can end up unhoused. You can be fired. These things are real, and you need to take a material assessment of your, and like, we need to stop saying, like, it's like an internalized shame to say, I can't always be out about everything, right? It's like,
you're not being brave enough or something, or you're not being strong enough.
Or you've internalized how being gay is bad. It's like, no, everyone else has.
Yeah, you're just protecting yourself.
But not everyone's cool with that.
Right. Like, it doesn't necessarily make people safer to make them be out all the time. And I think some queer people are just, like, desperately looking, like, because we know there's strength in numbers, right? So we just want, or like, maybe we had a good experience and we remember how shitty it was to be in the closet and how nice it is now that we're out and at a safe place. But, like, you've got to remember there was a reason you weren't out before. Yeah. And other people might still be in those circumstances, right? And
and that's why, like, for people who can be out, who are willing to take on that burden because they are safe enough to do so, we'll do the numbers part. We'll do the representation. We'll cover, right, and argue for and advocate for those who can't be. But, like, let's not put the onus on them, especially young people, like, especially people, like, in college or just getting out of college or in high school. Can we please not put the onus on them, right? Yeah. And of course, there is, like, the more normal it is, the more people that are out, the more it's accepted. Yeah, that's all true. That's why we need to, but until it is safe, they can't be out. Like,
well, it kind of goes the same type of situation as, like, the adoption thing. Like, the solution is not to drag people out of the closet. The solution is to surround them with appropriate support so that they are safe, so that they can just hold out for a job that is at a good place, or so that, like, they're not going to be homeless if it goes poorly, or, like, the solution is not, like, stick a Band-Aid on it by, like, forcing them to, like, move forward. It's supporting people, like, actually physically supporting them.
I was thinking about this with the adoption thing, but ultimately I think that there is a real problem in the nuclear family. The fact that we have so isolated the youth from broader community, it really keeps, like, youth liberation is a real thing. The nuclear family means that children can be so controlled and so coerced into certain things, into certain beliefs, that they don't actually have rights to information or to exploration, where if we had more community-based families, maybe these kids could come out to people they know are safe, and their parents would not have the ability to harm them. Like, I'm not saying that, like, parents shouldn't be parents, obviously. I just think that these stratified nuclear families are really alienating. And they're really bad for mothers. Like, they're horrible for mothers. For anyone who does fills the mother role, nuclear families are not great for them either. Mm-hmm. But it works great for patriarchy.
No, that's a really interesting point. My guilty pleasure is reading Am I the Asshole religiously on Reddit, and it is incredible the fucked up shit that families do, like, that parents do or think is acceptable or, like, do to their kids. And because of Am I the Asshole, I found out, which I didn't realize, if your kid is under 18, even if they made the money themselves, it belongs to the parents.
Wow.
My dad took my first tax return without telling me. Because I'd been 17 in that year. And so he took my first tax return without telling me. Yep, it was great. I was like,
sounds straight out of Am I the Asshole?
Yeah. Oh, my dad could fill up a lot of those.
There was definitely one where someone's parent had cashed their stimulus check because they were over 18, but they still had their home address because they were like at college or something, and their parent had cashed it and spent it all. Yeah. It's scary, like that level of control, and that's completely fine in our legal system. Is like, yeah, children are just property. It's fine.
And see, like, adoption reinforces that nuclear family alienation, right? Which is part of why a lot of, like, Indigenous people are so opposed to adopting out, not just for the genocide thing, but also they don't necessarily, in a lot of places on reservations, they don't necessarily follow that nuclear family style of raising children. Like, I know particularly in Alaska, it's definitely a group effort. Like, it's not this, they don't necessarily follow those same nuclear families, where when you isolate children into a home, you can control their information. You can control the questions they're able to ask. You can abuse them and you can hurt them, and you can, and this is fine. It is fine in our legal system. My sister's stepdaughter, my sister's stepdaughter, her mother, and her stepfather. So it's for the they're horribly abusive. They're horribly abusive to this child. They will restrict her food. They will, like, they call her horrible names. They don't beat her, as far as have been able to be proven. But they're so abusive. They are so abusive and manipulative. And now this child has been diagnosed with ODD, oppositional defiant disorder.
Right, of course.
Yeah. And it's like, no, she's hurting.
That's a real disorder? What?
No, I don't.
I don't think it's actually.
It has a name.
Oppositional defiance disorder. That's just anarchism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced that it's a real disorder so much. I believe that what they're describing is trauma.
Yeah.
So my understanding of a psychiatric disorder is specifically something can be classified as a disorder if it unavoidably creates difficulties in everyday life, is generally how it's considered, and like by and of itself. So like something being called oppositional defiance disorder, that's not of and by itself, that's in response to something else.
Well,
so somebody in authority.
PTSD, though, is in response to something else.
True, but it affects
to you, which I have.
True, but the trauma creates effects far later in life after the actual event is done, and hence why I think it qualifies. But I can see your point there.
No, I don't. It's not that far after.
Depends, because I've got several friends with very long-standing PTSD.
Yeah, it can show up later.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes it's pretty fast.
Fair enough.
Immediate. Like, it just depends. No, I'm not saying that, like, my problem with it is that it's essentially disobedient kid disorder.
Yeah.
Is what it is. Because, like, and I don't think that's valid, because I think children don't need to be obedient. I think that you have to sometimes you do have to make kids do things they don't want to do, but it's more of a negotiation, at least as far as I have seen, when it's not hurting kids. I don't have any
generally,
of my own.
Yeah. Unless you are a person who is willing to hurt your children, you are always negotiating.
I was gonna say, Cory's probably got the most expertise on this in this call.
Yeah. It's just like from what I've seen of this child, it is definitely that she's being abused, and she's she's so young, she can't process it. Obviously, she can't process it. And so she lashes out and she seeks to control situations where she feels like she can. And it's because, she doesn't have that. And it's super sad. Like it's very, going back to the adoption and child protective services, they're white people and they're Teflon. Like nothing happens. Nothing goes through. It doesn't matter how much we can show. It doesn't matter how much they interview this child. It does not matter. They won't get involved. But with people of color, it can be virtually nothing that gets kids taken from them. Yeah. Yeah. It's so, which is, for like, is way more traumatizing than anything for like you just to be taken from your parents. Like, so with white people, again, the double standards, white people just do not have the same regulation on their parenting that anyone else does.
I have a fairly good example, I guess, is when my partner, she wanted to go out and she's talking about going out and getting cigarettes before we were together and how she couldn't do it if the children were sleeping. And her daughter is 5 or whatever. The store is like 2 seconds away, but she can't do it because if somebody ever found out, then her children would be taken. But I used to do stuff like that with my kids all the time when they were 5 and 6, and nobody says a thing to me about it or ever did say a thing about it. So it's very much like
married women definitely have a different level of privilege than single women for sure.
Yeah,
maybe it has something to do with my sister and her partner not actually being married, that they've seen more scrutiny, even though like demonstrably the girl's mother and stepfather are the abusers.
Yeah, no, I was about to say, but if this person were a single mother, I bet there would be a lot more scrutiny. And also if the CPS or whomever can find something to trip their trigger to say this person is less than. So if they could find a mental health diagnosis, or if they could find a non-white people drug, right? Like probably not like prescription opioid abuse, because that's like a white people drug problem. That had that had scare quotes for podcast listeners. If they could find something like that, or if there was enough poverty, right? If there was enough poverty involved, that would absolutely then, so there's these levels of scrutiny that people endure, right? And so if you can stay looking abled and you can stay looking fairly well off and white, you can get away with a lot more. And yeah, being married helps as well because society pathologizes.
Here in Utah, Mormon, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And they're Mormon.
So. Naturally.
Like that's a huge amount of privilege here. And I know people who like in other Christian area, like Christian dominated areas, it's very similar. But Mormon it is a huge amount of privilege here. And I often wonder if that's why I got so interested in oppressions that I didn't live with, because I lived with so many growing up here. Like not being Mormon, being raised by a single mom, being queer, being a woman. Utah's also really not great about that. So like, I grew up with all of that, and it made me curious about other structures of oppression. So I just have to. Sometimes I wonder, but then there's lots of white women that don't ever wonder that. So who the hell knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I think people get tricked into thinking or get convinced that it's all about personal responsibility. And that's the big get out of jail free card, to not give a shit what other people are going through, right? Because whatever they're going through, it's their fault. And you're not ever going to have that happen to you.
Right. It's intoxicating, right? Like if you are in a position of privilege, you earned it. It was through your personal responsibility, you achieved this. But then it's also intoxicating if you're not doing well, because then you have the power to actually change your circumstance, right? And I mean, I don't know if anyone has been through like shame spirals, but like that feeling that you absolutely do have the power and control here will lead you down shame spirals. Like, and it is self-reinforcing. Like, if you are people who believe that it is still their personal responsibility and that they are not being oppressed by systems, are easier to keep oppressing in those systems rather than just being like, you know what, this one's outside my control, just gonna do the best I can.
So here's something that I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are on this. So like, to me, like, because of facts on the ground in the world, it seems, I don't like, obvious feels a little too strong, but it seems really, really clear that like a lot of this is chance-based and like so much of our lives are not in our control. Like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow and it would ruin my life. I could get cancer. I could have some sort of catastrophic financial situation. I could, like, my success is so clearly contingent on me having been lucky, right? How the hell do most people have such a problem? It's like my brain sees that and it's very clear, right? And like other people's brains, like even if you try to explain that to them, or like even if you just like talk to them for 2 seconds, you can surely say, but like, yeah, but if you had become paraplegic at 25, you obviously wouldn't be where you were today. So isn't it also luck? And it would just slip right off their brain. Like it would slip right off their brain.
That is terrifying. That it is all luck. That no, you don't have control. No, there is no grand purpose to life, and our existence is absurd. That is terrifying.
Is that why like people cannot like?
Well, yeah, they ought to.
Hold that?
I've had conversations with people about this before because being on the left, we tend to view things in this kind of systemic way, right? Where we say like these problems come from power structures and like the lack of support systems that people have. And like, we can acknowledge the lack of control we each have in our own fate, if it, to use the word, right? But
I feel like you have to get pretty far left before you start seeing people do a good job at that, to be perfectly honest. Like, I feel like there's a lot of just regular old liberals that don't do a great job of that and still worship at the individual responsibility altar a little bit.
A lot of liberalist philosophy is based in that idea that you do actually have so much more agency than you have.
Yeah.
And I do think obviously people have responsibility in personal things in their lives, like, right, like you have a responsibility to your partners and you have a responsibility to your community in so much that you can, right? Obviously, you know, like you should be kind to people. That I think that if you are agreed to be in a committed relationship, you are agreeing to take on some responsibility there. But the things that we actually have agency in are just so small in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's terrifying. I think that scares people.
It just doesn't matter, like, how scary something is to me, though. Like, if it's true, it's gonna stay there. And, like, maybe that's, like, neurodivergent brain a little bit, too. They sent me to Catholic school and tried to convince me that their religion was true, even though I didn't know there was any other option, and I thought I was being taught truth, just like in a science book. The entire time I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this, really? You know? Like,
I had similar.
So like,
by the time I was 10, I logicked hell couldn't possibly exist. Like,
yeah. Like, I was in 3rd grade when I found out that, like, other religions existed, including being an atheist. And I was like, oh, that's me. I'm that one. Like, I'm an atheist because this is obviously...
me a bit longer.
Well, I read a book. I read his Dark Materials series, which, you know, the Christians freaked out when it was made into a movie and said it was going to turn kids into atheists. And we were all like, that's ridiculous. And I was over here like, well, I mean, it was my first exposure to the idea.
At least one kid.
Yeah. I mean... it doesn't like, it didn't like specifically turn me into an atheist, but like basically in the book at some point, like it turns out that God is just like the first angel and he didn't actually create anybody and he was like lying about it and he dies. And I was just like, oh, so what?
The kids kill him.
Yeah. And I was like, so what they taught me in class, like, because I had religion class right next to science class, I was like, that doesn't actually have to be the truth. Like they could have just made that up. Oh, well, they clearly made that up because it was very nonsensical.
Totally. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I don't know if it's
I'm just constantly fascinated.
I think maybe that just could be like you have a particular resiliency to those kinds of things. Because for me to accept that my existence was absurd, I had to go through a full-on existential crisis. Like I had to deal with like this, I laid it. I remember when I actually like started coming to terms with my own the absurdity of my own existence is I laid in bed and I was like, okay, how far out into space can I think? Like how, because I know infinity is impossible, but how far can I think it out, right? And I just started like progressively going out bigger and bigger and bigger and how small my existence was and how meaningless it was and how unlikely life after death could be if we thought of the universe as this big. And I wasn't even anywhere close, right? Like to being able to to understand infinity. I wasn't even close. And I just started bawling. I was like, wow. I'm gonna die and nothing matters. And like,
see, like that doesn't bother me at all. Like I just have no emotional reaction to it. I did struggle though. Like I definitely know and have known for a very long time that like the just world fallacy is bullshit, right? That like you don't get things just because you work hard. But still, when I was going through those like really hard financial times, when I was having my little midlife crisis, when my farm fell apart and stuff, like there was like 2 or 3 times where I just like broke down in tears because I was like, I know that's not how it actually works, but like it's just supposed to.
But come
like,
the fuck on already.
Supposed to. like I'm just so mad that I just worked so hard. Why the fuck did I work so hard? Like, yeah. And I just like, I know it's bullshit, but I just like, my brain still kind of thought that it mattered a little bit, you know?
There's a comfort in it though. Like if you can blame yourself, then it's easier to understand. And it's like, at least you get to blame yourself. At least you get to have an answer. And there, as much as it hurts in a way that you can internalize and make sense of. And I think that's why people stick with it, even when it's hurting them. Because thinking of everything on such a systemic thing is so big and it's so scary. And it's so terrifying to realize how little control you have over so much.
And it feels so hopeless.
It does. You're so small and the systems are so big. And like, I think that's why even a lot of liberals just keep holding on to it like, no, really, personal responsibility does matter. Like, and, I really just think that it's something a lot of abuse victims, like that's why we can so easily keep in these shame cycles, because it's so much easier to accept that I actually fucked up, that I actually deserved the abuse rather than that someone did it to me and that I had no control, that there was nothing I could do. And like, that's so scary, like to realize that you can be hurt and there's nothing you can do. Like, it's terrifying. I'm going to get a little emotional.
Now that's really interesting. I feel like my shame spirals are like the opposite. Like I only feel shame about things that I was like really sure were in my control. So if something was out of my control, then I get that's when the only time I can emotionally detach from it. So like for whatever reason, like I'm wired the opposite.
I'm so grateful for that. Well, I'm so grateful.
I mean, it still results in plenty of shame cycles and beating myself up about things for sure. But like, but maybe it has like, and maybe that's why I'm like totally cool with the worldview where I have less control, you know, because I'm like, yeah, that means I don't have to freak out about it anymore. I can relax because it's not going to be my fault. Because I'm just like constantly freaking out about like, is it my fault? Like that's my thing that I'm always hyper focusing on. Like, will it be my responsibility? Even to the point of like things that like should just genuinely make me upset, like a cow dying or something. It's always 2 layers. Am I upset? But will it look like it's my fault? Like, and I'm way more focused on like, are things my fault? So whenever I can rationalize that they aren't really my fault, then I can relax.
You know what? I would say like, good. Yes. Okay. Like,
yeah, that's definitely the opposite
really
of
funny.
Entirely valid, I guess is what I would say. Like, but I can understand why people are like, you can explain to them how it was not in their hands. And then also mostly men that I've known, they happen to be doing a lot better in a lot of ways, especially women. Like, they make more money and they have more disposable income and they have so much more agency in their life. And then if I explain to them that their success was predominantly luck, that doesn't feel so good. Yeah. And they don't like that. And since it's much easier for them to just go, no, I actually deserve this. And that's why status quo was okay.
Yep.
I'm not racist.
That's literally what my dad, after voting for Trump, said to me, like, when they finally called the election for Biden, we were deer hunting together. And the very first thing he said was, okay, racist. I want Trump to shut up and go away now because nothing's going to change for me either way. So I would like this to be over and never hear about it again because literally none of it affects my life at all. And I was like, well, you said the quiet part out loud. You literally don't give a shit. Wow, because it will not affect you.
Cool, thanks.
Must be nice.
It does affect me.
Yeah.
So much.
Must be fucking nice. Going back to the shame spiral thing a little bit ago, I have those almost constantly. One of the big effects of ADHD is something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is this idea that like if you feel like you're being rejected, regardless of the actual circumstances, like if you get this idea in your head that you've been rejected, that you just go into a shame spiral. And it's not fun because it will happen at the tiniest little thing and your brain will just amplify it over and over and over. And like you go back and forth between this is unfair. No, I'm in the wrong. But am I? And yeah, it's just this constant thing of your brain attacking itself. And it feels like you have become a self-mutilating zombie that is eating your own brain. It is not fun.
It's true. I will say, because I have ADHD and PTSD from abuse, therapy totally does help, and it can help you break those cycles. So, like, even if it's just your ADHD brain, therapy does still help. You still have a malleable brain that can learn new ways and how to break cycles. I have a strategy where I talk to another version of myself. Like, it's a construct I made up for me, and she will say the things that I need to hear to stop those shame cycles. Like, I love you. It's fine. Hey, this is actually out of your control, so you don't need to worry about it. Things like that. And if you say it out loud, it actually activates different parts of your brain. And so it can actually help you break those same cycles and spirals. So I don't know. Therapy, I went through a year straight of therapy. I should probably go back because I've been the 2020 and 2021 has been brutal. But it does help. It does help you break those same cycles. So obviously I can't diagnose, but I don't think it's harmful to recommend therapy. As long as you like the therapist.
No, I don't think that's harmful.
I've done a bit of therapy in the past, and it definitely did help a bit, but there are elements of it that are, like, it's hard to stop it from starting, and then, like, the best I've been able to learn how to do is kind of shorten the cycle and get over it more quickly, which is definitely useful, but, like, there's still there's still something there that's like, it's eating away at you. And even if it's like, if it's instead of, chomping off your whole arm, is just taking a small chunk out of it, it's still not fun. So, but I agree, absolutely. Therapy can definitely help in a lot of these situations. There are a ton of
finding the therapist
methods
you click with will really help, not like trying it and then dropping it. Because like if you really click, like you tend to really see the value. You
want to go.
Yeah. That's never been my experience for therapy.
That's what I was wondering.
No matter. I've gone through a lot of different therapy across my life, although weirdly enough, somehow no one ever managed to, despite the fact that I was in various programs for troubling behavior as a child and a preteen, never managed to get any sort of diagnosis for things that I now know that I have, and that was really frustrating because
Those troubled teen programs are notoriously terrible. So
yeah. So I don't have an official diagnosis for autism, but my understanding of it, I do show most of the symptoms. I do have an official diagnosis for ADHD, and so these are things that I can go back in my life and look at the kinds of symptoms that are associated with these and remember incidents. When I was younger, that I'm like, oh yeah, that should have been a red flag. And it's funny because in a way it was, and I got brought to, as you say, those troubled teen programs, but eventually, the path that my medical history took ended up with me being diagnosed with late onset, puberty, and somehow that was the explanation for everything I was going through, which is just weird as hell.
Okay.
So that was a whole fucking journey that ended up not really getting me anywhere.
So it sounds like to me a lot of the therapy you've been to has been pretty problematic, in your experience.
Yes, my experience of therapy has been so the last therapist I had was good. He and I seemed to get along, but there was still just this, this, I don't know what it was, but we never really clicked in that way that I'm hearing you talk about. So my experience of therapy has never been one where I want to go, unfortunately.
So, you want to find a therapist that you have that vibe with, you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and if you don't, if you start seeing a therapist and it's not going great, find a new one. It's fine. Fuck it.
Yeah. Fair. And it might I've definitely done it, and you do a couple sessions, you're I'm not clicking, and then it takes 9 months before you have the bandwidth to try again, and so that definitely happens. But yeah, my therapist right now is literally a autistic, gender nonconforming, bisexual in a heterosexual appearing marriage, and I'm how much more dead on can we get here?
That's rad. That's rad as hell. My therapist used only evidence-based methods, but would do things that had a sort of poetic, spiritual-esque vibe to it sometimes. We did something that was looked like tarot cards, but it was supposed to be me interpreting that and then connecting with my sense of self, something that's very real, something very material, right? Who am I? How do I exist? But we did it with something that looked like tarot cards, and it wasn't woo-woo. There was no woo, but it was rather, I guess you would say, not cynical. It's very touchy-feely, emotional, and I just, that works so well for me. I am such a sensitive, tender person that worked. You find somebody that just, it works, and more than anything, that for you, that you feel good when you're seeing them. You leave therapy feeling better. It might have been a hard session. It might be emotionally. It might have been something that took a lot of work, but it still feels good, cathartic almost, but not. It's not the right word. I don't know. It's like when you stretch really good. Like maybe it kind of hurts.
It's hard to breathe. It's hard to breathe. It hurts, but yeah, it's good for you.
It's a good workout.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I would say is like most important thing is finding a therapist that you feel good with.
Yeah, the match exists, and I think for most people, finding the right match does not look like having the energy to try one out and then try another one out 2 weeks later, and then like it's like totally normal, I think, to like try one out, do a few sessions, kind of like ghost them because like it's not feeling right, and then like in 6 months
totally
you're like,
oh, ghost them.
I'm doing like shit. You think 6 months later, and then you like do a few more Google searches and like but they are out there.
A therapist I really liked, and then she quit doing therapy because she was going through too much in her life, so I had to find another one. Oh, it worked out. It worked out great, but it was like this. Yeah, going to therapy isn't super easy to get into, but once you find it, it can be very helpful.
I found I went to a number of I guess counselors, therapists, whatever, but they were all men. And that often carries with it a certain patriarchal type baggage. They have their own biases. They have their own issues. And the last man that I saw, he was very much into the idea that men's and women's brains were very different, and we had to do things very differently for them. It was like, okay, I can't stay at this one. You're no good.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought I would be kind of intimidated by having a man for a therapist, but like I just had so much in common with the guy that I see now because of all those other things that I listed that like, yeah, it's absolutely the best fit I've ever had. So I think it's really interesting, like what things in common are important and what ones aren't, you know?
It's so funny, isn't it? I have a friend, I have a Black friend who exclusively only sees Black women therapists because his experience with going to anyone not Black and a man has, but he's felt invalidating to his emotions, and he feels that Black women are just more likely to validate his emotions. And it's like, it's so interesting, right? Like, it's just, it's not necessarily going to be easy. Like Dell said, if you if you go to a therapist and you're a couple of sessions in and it's not working, you can just feel it in your body that it's not working, and it takes you 9 months to find a new one. That's fine. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm at least I'm the kind of person that like it takes me a couple of months at least to get up the bandwidth to like do a medical appointment, especially a medical appointment with like somebody I've never seen before. Like that's just like a whole mountain for me to climb. So that's why I don't want to like feel like I'm telling anyone they should be like just like on top of that shit, because for me that would just be impossible.
Yeah. Same. Especially because I have the body shape of somebody who doesn't get treated badly for my weight in a doctor's office ever, regardless of what weight I get to. It doesn't up or down. Nobody's ever said a damn thing in a medical office, but I have felt very scrutinized. And so like I get a lot of anxiety at doctor's offices. So I know the feeling.
I just have anxiety in new people, new situations, especially like if I'm coming there asking for something or like to take their, I don't know, like anytime I have to go somewhere new is just like a whole thing for me, which feels so silly. Like even like a gas station that I haven't stopped at least like half a dozen times. Like if I have to stop there, I get like all shaky and weird. And my husband is like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm like, I'm going to go in the wrong door or something. And it's just going to be terrifying.
I don't know. Anything.
I have never been here
before. It doesn't have to be concrete.
Like, I'm just terrified that I'm going to do, like, I don't know how it works at this gas station. And like, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know how it works here. Who knows what sort of alien universe of weird social cues I could be stepping into that I won't be able to tell what's going on. And like, I'm just so like, it's so funny when you step back and think about it, but it's like, it's all about like, I'm so terrified that I'm just gonna like do the wrong thing, like social. I'm gonna like park in the wrong spot. I'm gonna use the wrong door.
I feel that the terror's real, but also it's funny to say it. Like, I'm terrified of four-wheelers. Like, I can't be on a four-wheeler. I will like full panic attack, cry. I have no idea why. I'm just terrified. And like, it's just
They're
like
actually pretty scary.
I will imagine terrible things happening. Dangerous. Like it, but I'm not afraid of horseback riding, which is way more dangerous.
Yeah.
But I get it. And so I just like having fears that are just like, you're like, it's kind of funny to talk about because like it's kind of silly, but also like the fear is real.
And I feel like such a concrete fear. Like in my head, it feels like I'm afraid of something extremely specific and concrete. And then like when I open my mouth to explain it, there's just nothing there to say. It's just like doing something wrong. I'm afraid of doing the wrong thing here because I've never been here before. That's not like in my brain, it feels like I have these really concrete things that I'm afraid of. And then like I open my mouth and there's just nothing to I can't explain. I can't put any of those concrete fears into words. So like, are they actually concrete? And I'm like a person who has words for everything. So that doesn't make any sense.
It's total like I think it's entirely like okay. I'm definitely not laughing. Oh, you got something to say?
Hi.
Oh, thank you.
Oh
no. Good.
This
kid.
is Orzo. It's really not. It's not the end of the show until you see his butthole.
I have a cow named Orzo.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
I'm wondering if I saw your cat's name and that gave me that idea, like subconsciously.
I wonder because I talk about him all the time.
Yeah, and because Orzo's only like a year old, so
and we've definitely been like online friends for longer than that.
Yeah. I bet I saw that and it subconsciously worked its way. I was like, what's a good name for this calf? Orzo.
I think it's cute.
It's a good name. I need short names, so
yeah, and like a cow named after a pasta. That's adorable. Yeah.
So my rules for cow names is like the shorter the better, because I have to write it on an ear tag. It needs to be not a human name because I despise the idea of giving my cows human names for the girls because like I just feel like that's so boring. You could name them like any word in the universe. So like why would you pick? Because I just see people just reusing human women's names constantly and I'm like lame. And then it needs to have like a theme that I can continue. So Orzo is perfect because pasta. So now I can like continue with different pastas when Orzo theoretically calves, although I don't think she's pregnant yet. Those are my 3 cow name things that I look for.
And you can also go with just like Italian food, like basil. That's a cute cow name.
I've got a spice track already. So I need to like keep the spices on the spice track.
This is the spice track.
Spice track. Spice track. That's so funny. A spice track of cows.
Yeah, and it's hard though because there's like, so I kind of like have 2 spice tracks and trying to keep them distinguished from each other is going to be a challenge because I have a cow named Rosemary and I have 23 embryos frozen from her that I'm going to have to put in at some point. And they are gender sorted. So they are all, it's just like, it's like a brand name. I know it's like technically it's sex sorted, but it's a brand name that they use for this program. So they're sorted embryos, so they're female, and probably 2/3 of those embryos will actually like end up producing a live calf. So I have to save for Rosemary's babies. I have to save names, but then I also ended up with this cow named Ginger. There was Nutmeg and then Ginger, and so Ginger's baby I named Curry because like curry is actually like a mix of spices. So I thought like, or like also a type of food.
Go with like herbs and spices. Yeah. You can keep, you know, like you got like chives over here with rosemary, but then you've got
it's very like, technical and important.
Yeah. I'm a home cook too, so like
yeah.
I think about food a lot.
Anyway, I don't want to add a third branch to the spice tree to confuse things even further, is what I'm saying. So, like, yeah.
So you could go with, I don't know, then pastas are fine. Because I was going to say, like, you could go with salamis, but that's in poor taste. Just go with pastas.
Well done.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we've probably been recording for a while now, and we've really diverged off our well-researched original topics.
Yes.
I thought there was some really interesting conversation in there, though.
Absolutely.
What, Kevin?
I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was good conversation.
All right. You can find us at skeptarchy.com. Our Twitter is at skeptarchypod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/skeptarchy, and you can send us an email at skeptarchy@gmail.com.
You can find me on Twitter as AncomPsychom or over on Twitch at Anarchist Laboratory.
You can find me on Twitter at More Cowbell, MOAR, Cowbell with an E at the end. I'm on Facebook as Dell Unearth. I should add, I'm also on TikTok as Dell Unearth. We should add that in there because I'm really trying to get followers. I really want 1,000 followers so I can do lives from my cow pasture. Like that.
Well,
is my
I like
goal in
every
life
one of
right
yours
now.
that comes up. Because like sex workers, we have this thing where we get into groups where we do like for like to help boost each other in the algorithm. So like anyone that I am online friends with at all, like I like everything. It's
I try to.
It's a solidarity thing, damn it.
Sometimes I spend most of my time on my following page and I try to like pretty much everything that comes across it, but sometimes I get busy and I don't spend a lot of time on the following page, so then I think I miss people's stuff, you know? But anyway, sorry about that, to derail. I haven't
done anything on TikTok in a while. You can find me at Felicia Entwined on Twitter, or you can follow my sexy stuff at RR like Red Rose Lush on Twitter. You can also, and that's the same for Fansly, Manyvids, and it's RR Luscious on TikTok. But don't put that up. Don't worry about that. Just find me on Twitter at RR Lush.
Okay.
Yeah, that's got all the links.
All right. And I guess I'm at Skeptical Lefty on Twitter, or you can send me a friend request at facebook.com/CJBrainstorm. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.